Painters and sculptors, all artists, use their eyes in a special way. They look hard, but they don't just look hard at the appearance of things and try to reproduce what they see. The marks they make very often refer closely to what they have in front of them. This film sequence, shot in 1963, shows Edward Borden making preliminary studies for a large mural. But even when they draw or paint directly from life, as many artists do, as Borden did, what they know and think and feel, what they believe, as well as what they see, can always find its way into their work. Among other things, Borden is trying to show what it's really like to be here, to work in a place such as this. In this program, we look at pictures of three artists, each with a clearly personal response to his surroundings, each with a clear desire to paint much more than meets the eye, the image and the imagination. Stanley Spencer, born 1891, died 1959. Cookham Village. Spencer lived here practically all his life. He was a keen observer and painted portraits and landscapes with great skill. But paintings such as the Resurrection in Cookham Churchyard, the paintings he most cared for himself, owe less to direct observation than to his intensely personal memories of village life and his visionary religious beliefs.
When I'm doing a landscape, I'm very much looking at the subject, and should be. The memory doesn't come into the landscape at all, because it'd be a complete mistake. The whole thing is dependent on close adherence to what's in front of me. If you like, it's almost slavish. That's why it says the landscapes and portraits are the exact reverse of the other pictures. Personally, I don't think I have any ability when I'm faced with any object, either landscape or portrait.
In fact, his minute observation of people he knew, of the village and of the natural world, found its way into all his work. The churchyard, that's the setting of one of Stanley Spencer's most personal and memorable pictures, on a subject always dear to him, that he painted with amusement, tenderness and splendor, the Resurrection. In a sequence from the only film he ever made, we've replaced the black and white shots of his painting with new color footage. Otherwise the original is intact, and we can see and hear this major artist describe the meaning for him of the supernatural events he painted. The Resurrection in Cookham Churchyard.
You see, everything has a sort of double meaning for me. There's the ordinary everyday meaning of things, utilitarian meaning, and the imaginary meaning about it all. And as I was saying, I wanted to bring these things together. And in this first big resurrection picture of mine, one has really rather a good example of that kind of thing. I think I'll try and do a sort of personally conducted tour through the picture, and you will probably see what I mean. There, for instance, up in the corner is Hilda, or rather just some woman either getting over the stile. She's getting over the steps. And that's the river of life. That's what I've imagined it to be. This is Cookham Church, more or less, and the river runs behind it. Down below, you'll see people reading their own tombstones, which must be rather wonderful to do. And nobody's in any hurry. Those men lying on the top of the stones I like very much, because it gave me the feeling that the resurrection was a peaceful occasion. Even Don, the poet, says that he will suffer not so much as an interruption, that it'll be quite a peaceful pattern. That's my feeling. And I'm very fond of peace, and I like the happiness. That's the main idea of this picture. When I'm here, you have people being more or less tidied up. One man is being brushed down by his wife. But I was thinking of my father and my mother brushing him down before he went to London. Little intimate, ordinary personal happenings which bring me into this realm of a sort of awareness. And all the time I wanted to show this new kind of outlook, this new kind of state of awareness. That's the real important thing. Even the woman smelling the flower, she's not holding it in a sort of that sort of a way. She's really curious about it. She's feeling how momentous this occasion is. So therefore, she's pushing it against her face, which I think is rather expressive. Now we come to the top thing. I rather liked up the top there. You see there's a stone figure on the top of the tombstone, and it's rather reminiscent of these two men reclining on the stone for sort of sunning themselves. Well, I rather like the feeling that that figure seems to be sort of resurrecting with these. I mean, everything in a sense is resurrecting. Everything is arriving in this great state of happiness and peace. This, for instance, here, the woman lying in the tomb, which is all hunched up, ivy all around it, gives a feeling of rest and peace. And I always like that sort of state, where one could just sit and think. Now here, for example, along here, you have what I call that is like the sort of resurrection of thought. They are sort of prophets, or something of that kind, and you notice they're all in different positions of thinking. For instance, that is very much the position of thought. I mean, if you go like that, you're thinking about something, and so on. That's meant to be Moses, I think, with the stones. I'm probably thinking of the shape of the tombstones. That girl leaning against the stone there I like, because it gives me a feeling of almost of casualness. I'm not sure if I wanted this all. That's what I like about this picture, that it manages to be in a sense impressive without that all. The happiness is so great. And I like the casual way that she's using the shape of the stone to lean back against, sort of fraternizing with it. Here is rather an interesting scene. The girl who's coming out of the grave, of course, is just the meadowland, just the wild flowers. And as she comes out, I rather had the idea that she should be dressed in clothes that had a pattern on it similar to the wild flowers, because it happened to be a pattern that she rather liked. The roses round the door, which I very much associate with the Cookham Church, they were those little tiny white roses, as a matter of fact. I think they call them Seven Sisters. But that rose got big. Everything seems to get big with me, and those roses got too big. This scene that I'm just in front of, I'm rather keen about. I think I was thinking of some very grand man. I don't really like flowers, but I like him very much, and I couldn't help putting nice flowers. And I rather loved doing these wreaths, putting those wreaths onto the grave, because the grave was just meadowland. It's just wild meadowland, and you have the wild flowers inside these wreaths, clover and plantain and daisies and so on, and the lilies and the more sort of hothouse flowers round it. Well, that mixture, to me, is almost like the mixture of this life and the resurrected life, those flowers and those flowers. It's the bringing together of these contrasts which brings out this special meaning that I'm keen on. There are other scenes here. There's the one of the men coming out. They're not meant to be wicked. There's a slight check on them, but I don't want anybody having any sort of being wicked or anything like that. So they come out in rather a different way. Here is a sort of, almost like a sort of my own signature. It's meant to be me reclining there, in between those tombs like that. And I was thinking of a book, that if you look into a book, you feel when you settle down to read, the book becomes a sort of associated in your mind with a peaceful state. And so that figure put between that further emphasizes, to me, this peaceful feeling. I think that's all I can think about it at the moment. That's what's wonderful about art, is that it is that great help that it says, I go to prepare a place for you. And that's wonderful. It's with you.
Graham Sutherland, born in 1903, died 1980. 1949, a portrait of the best-known writer of the day. It helped to make Sutherland the best-known painter. In 1952, he was commissioned to design a huge tapestry for Coventry Cathedral. The tapestry and the portrait are dramatic and yet curiously still. They're monumental. And so, too, are the pictures he based on natural forms that are often worn or decayed, of rock and bark and hedgerow. He turned even fragments of what he saw in the landscape into images of grandeur. When he was 73, Graham Sutherland was filmed in Pembrokeshire.
I think I can say that it was in this triangle of land that I first began to learn my trade as a painter. I came in 1934-5, and it was a total revelation to me. I'd never seen country quite like this before. It was full of forms and suggestions which were totally new to me. When I came here, I was hooked and obsessed. I'm dependent very much as a painter on what I see. Whatever happens afterwards, whatever transformations, whatever paraphrases are made, I need to start from a given scene, object, or series of objects.
1954, the south of France, where Sutherland spent a large part of each year.
With regard to this particular series of fountain paintings, it started by my seeing various fountain forms, of which there are a lot around here. And then I did see the leaves in my garden, which seemed, at the time, likely to form a kind of impersonal background to these forms, these fountain forms, which gradually took the guise of being half fountain, half human. I have to get something down, maybe even on the back of an envelope. I can then develop the thing, and I tend to want to develop it if I see something which has already been added to paper, as it were. Of course, it has to be worked out in various stages according to the complication of the subject, in the form of small notes, mostly in colour, which brings me closer to the object, closer to the subject also, to the general subject. Finally, I think one then does a lot with rather careful studies of details, which are often done, in my case, from things that I pick up in the garden.
Basically, the thing is drawn best because it's loved. When I say loved, I don't mean just loved in the sentimental sense. I mean much more than that. One picks up something which seems to have a form which one can do something with. This is part of love. Love is the wrong word. Let's use another word. Be involved. I hate that word too, because that's one of the modern jargon things. Involved with, yes, of course. In a sense, this is very much the thing. Why are you? Nobody knows. Why one prefers one thing to another? Nobody knows. Why a hole in a bit of bread, one hole in relation to another, is slightly more interesting than another. According to your temperament, according to your needs, you draw it. I think there's a strong relation to certain of my studies from nature to my portraits. Some people have said that I really am a sort of portraitist of natural forms.
Whether that's a fair description or not, Sutherland certainly hit the jackpot with his portraits. In 1949, he painted Somerset Maugham. Successful, obeying, knowing. Sutherland's dramatic portrait fixes, embalms him. These early sketches suggest how the finished picture would turn out, but the narrow full-length canvas is unexpected and theatrical.
Of course, the whole thing depends very much on a certain rapport, I think, between the person and you. I mean, how they're prepared to cooperate, whether this kind of tug of war, you trying to extract and the sitter trying to retain in a strange kind of way. I mean, the study of a person's face when they sit for their portrait is fascinating, because the expression that comes over it of, it's not exactly self-consciousness, it's a curious mixture of self-consciousness and disgust. They obviously wonder why they've ever said they wanted their portraits painted. Well, the beginning was this extraordinary, fleeting impression that one had of a person with immense curiosity. A hand came forward unexpectedly out of a door. Cut off. I saw nothing but the hand. And I was looking at him sideways.
Yeah?
And then round the corner came this figure. The head bowed a little. Curious, sort of. The nose almost smelling out the situation. It was fascinating.
What kind of a skin?
Like a baby.
A baby
Exactly
skin?
like a baby, yes.
Transparent?
Transparent. This was marvelous when he actually sat, and if he sat in the evening when the sun was coming through the window, you know how in La Tour, a finger against a candle, how the blood shows through the finger.
Oh, yeah.
And this was exactly so with Churchill's face, because the sun came in and it came right through the whole thing.
I doubt whether any of the modern democracies abroad has shown such a degree of kindness and generosity to a party politician who has not yet retired and may at any time be involved in controversy. The portrait is a remarkable example of modern art. It certainly combines force and candor.
But Churchill didn't like it, and this was the last time the painting was seen in public.
been revealed that Lady Spencer Churchill destroyed the portrait of Sir Winston by Graham Sutherland. According to Lady Churchill's executors, she promised her husband it would never again see the light of day. Roger Carroll asked Graham Sutherland, whose home is in the south of France, for his reaction to the news.
My reaction today is minimal because it all happened so very long ago. I merely was sorry that Churchill didn't like the portrait, but that was all.
You have been quoted, though, as describing it as an act of vandalism to have the painting destroyed.
I think that this is on a different basis altogether. I think one can reasonably say the destruction of any work of art is an act of vandalism, of course. It's a thing rare in history, except for religious or political reasons.
Norman Cornish, born 1919. 25 years ago, in 1963, Cornish was drawing and painting and working as a miner in Spennymoor, in the coalfields of County Durham. He went down the pit first when he was 14 and worked at the Dean and Chapter Colliery for 28 years. In some parts there, the underground seams were less than 16 inches high.
Every little scrap of cubic capacity in the mine has had to be taken out by mankind. Even the space that contains the air that you breathe has had to be won out of the solid rock or the coal seam. It isn't a natural cave, you see. You've got to make it yourself. And naturally, although things aren't as bad perhaps as they were in the so-called good old days, there isn't as much space as you would like. And restrictions of space mean that you've got to develop a sense of keeping out of the road of moving wagons and things, and not to swing your arms wildly to, if we're going to knock something with a mel, we look up first to see what we're knocking. You know, we just don't knock a prop out unless we examine carefully what's going to happen when we knock it out. We don't think about this. We do this instinctively. It's a job. It's a job that we're trained to do. This pit road is about 1.5 miles or 2 miles between my house and the colliery, you see. I don't walk it just at the moment, but I did walk it for many, many, many years, 28 years. In all times of the day and night, in all weathers, and in all mental weathers, because I wasn't happy sometimes, I was happy other times, and so on. You see, it's a road that's been trodden flat and hard by surely millions and millions and millions of boots plodding that road, plodding it hard. And to me, it simply tingles with, I can see all these people walking up and down in my memory. And not only that, I'm walking it, and I can feel them walking it as well. And that gives me, well, something else which comes right deep down inside. It's not just something seen, it's something felt, something heard. The smell of, perhaps, of the tar railings. All of these things come into the mind, and then the mind objectively tries to put it down in paint form or in drawing form. How can one paint about life if we don't live? And if we live in a well, what's generally regarded, what is it, an ivory tower existence, painting our pictures at the top of this mountain, well, what can we paint about? You see, we must have something about which to paint. And if we want to paint about life, if we want to snatch little pieces of life as they happen, They don't always, they could even happen in an ivory tower, but they're hardly likely to. But they're happening all the time in the mainstream of the world, and it doesn't matter where you are at, which country you are at, what job you're doing, provided it's a sincere job of work which is being sincerely done. Life is happening there. These people are not interested in me, they're not posing for me, they are people. It's enormously difficult, it's almost a challenge to try and capture the wonderful little bits of life, because life doesn't pose for you, it goes on. And you've got to learn how to grab, how to snatch, to slice it out, carve it out. At night and come in perhaps at 5 or 6 in the morning, especially in winter when it's dark and wet. The first thing that I see as they open the door is a portrait of my oldest child, a little girl. When I see that, and across the threshold, I'm back in a castle. I suppose that's right, every Englishman having his castle. Well, this is my castle. I'm rather interested in shapes, naturally, as I'm employing these shapes constantly in my drawings. They have emotional value, and shapes mean different things to different people. A shape, which is very significant, is a telegraph pole, and so much so, in fact, and I've passed so many so often, that they seem to force their way into my mind, whether I couldn't reject them. They say, well, come here, mate, you know, I'm here, and then what about it? And to some people, a telegraph pole is exactly that, a telegraph pole. To other people, they conjure that a vision of it once being a tree growing on perhaps a Norwegian slope. To other people, perhaps they're conscious of that, plus the fact that there are any number of thousands of people at one end of the wires talking to any number of thousands of people at the other end. Here we get the singing quality of humanity. A telegraph pole has that sense to me, in that it's part of the business of communications between one mind and another, which is what I in fact am trying to do, exactly the same thing in my drawings. And then by another process of thought, the telegraph pole has a very significant shape in its cross formation, and by under certain conditions, mental conditions, it can become a crucifix. One can't ignore the emotional, the way in which shapes direct one's emotions.